Hey guys, welcome to another voice blog. Today I want to talk about the flinch. There's a lot of videos out there that will talk about mechanics. 99% of them, voice-wise, will talk about mechanics. Mechanics are very important. The mechanics need to be good. But what happens when we're flinching? Now, most struggling singers have a flinch. A lot of the time they're not even aware of it because it's such a habit. But basically they have a flinch. They have really what a flinch is the habit of trying to consciously control the process of singing. Now, we can consciously adjust mechanics in our practice, and we can address one part of the mechanic at once, at a time, and when we address that mechanic positively over a period of time, it will drift into the subconscious, and then the subconscious is the automatic that does all of it at once. So there's a certain amount of what we need to think about is where we put in the focus of the mind. We can only really focus on one thing. Now, during our practice, during our mechanical work on mechanics as singers, it's very useful to consciously focus on one part of the mechanics. If, for example, there's a vowel shift halfway up the scale, we're going mum 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 mum, something like that. We can consciously mum 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 mum, something like that. We can consciously make that adjustment in our practice. Now, the problem happens is when we go to perform and rehearse full songs, we take that into a different part of singing. And the other part of singing is when we just let the mechanics work, regardless of where they're at. Now, as over time, the mechanics will get better, but when we perform and when we're rehearsing full songs, we got to let the mechanics do the work and not try and consciously impact those mechanics. What tends to happen is the singer will anticipate something like the high note or whatever it is, and they will grab a little bit to try and help the process. The irony is that help makes it worse, and when it goes badly, they're more likely to flinch again, and obviously when they do flinch again, it's worse. They get poor feedback, they feel like it's not going well, and it just becomes a self-reinforcing loop. Now, good singers that sound professional, have no flinch. They aren't trying to consciously adjust the process on the fly. They allow their mechanics, which are typically good mechanics, to just do the work, and they get out of the way. Now, the challenge is, if you're in the habit of flinching, how do we learn to get out of the way? We've got to learn that the mind can focus on one thing, and that one thing that we're focusing on has to be something that leads us in the right direction. So this is the middle ground, neutral. We've got positive and we've got negative. Anything from neutral up to a flow state, which would be the highest of positive mental states, whatever we want to call it. Anywhere from neutral to the top is fine. We're going to sing well. Anything from neutral down to really extreme negative, grabbing, loads of strain, loads of push, loads of flinch, chronic flinching, anything in there is not going to be good. So the one thing we focus on needs to be in that area, or it just needs to be in that area. So neutral things we could focus on, anything even outside of the music. I was rehearsing the other day thinking about my washing up, that I needed to do things about a couple of boring house tasks, things like that, and that went on for about a song and a half, and I kind of snapped out of it all of a sudden. I was like, I'm rehearsing. Hadn't even realised nothing was going wrong in the music, it was all perfect. So that's a completely neutral thought, just daydreaming, allowing my mechanics, which I've rehearsed thousands of times over and over again, allowing my mechanics to just work on their own. It's the same as if you've ever driven a car down the motorway when you've driven a long time, especially late at night when there's not much traffic on the road. You'll tend to all of a sudden realise you're daydreaming and you've been driving for 15 minutes without even thinking about it. Now, that's the same thing. You're allowing all the subconscious stuff that's automatic to just do its thing, and you're getting out of the way. These neutral thoughts, this neutral focus that is outside of music, is going to actually often help your singing if you're a flincher, believe it or not. Positive things you can think about. I think about, typically at the minute, mic distance. If I'm singing loud, pulling back, heady, forward, medium volume, I'm in the middle somewhere. That gets my mind off of my vocal mechanics on my guitar. Other things that I could think about are just having fun and enjoying performing. Yeah. You tend to find you can get some momentum if things are going well. You tend to push out a little bit more and see how far I can take this, and as things go better and better, you tend to get in a bit of a positive spiral that leads you towards a flow state. Keeping your mind clear is another good one. Breathing, just focusing on your breathing, or focusing on just being in the moment. All these things can lead you from neutral towards positive, or just typically put you in that area somewhere. Being in the now, not being concerned about the outcome, not being concerned about what people might be thinking, how well is it going, how's the audience reacting, hitting the note, all these things. Don't worry about the note, just allow the mechanics to do the work. So, we've got to understand that as much as working on mechanics is very important, until we understand that the mind has to be focused in the right direction, it has to be allowing the mechanics to do the work, until we consciously understand that we even have a flinch, this sense of grab, that's the flinch. It's the fear, basically, the fear trying to help. And when we try and help with that fear, it's only going to make it worse, which unfortunately leads to poor results, poor outcomes, which leads us to more fear, more chance of flinching. So typically when we've got the worst singers, or the singers that struggle the most, they've gone down this long road of flinching, poor mechanics, poor results. Because of the poor results, they try and help more, which means they flinch more, which means, so that spiral has been going on and on for quite a while. And for me, it was maybe 6 or 7 years I'd been flinching, and it got worse and worse and worse. So I had to dig myself out of a very big hole. Most people don't flinch as much as I did when they start, so they haven't got quite so far to go. But a lot of singers that find they're struggling have some amount of flinch on some parts of their songs. The chronic flinchers will always flinch most of the time. There's one chap I've seen at an open mic recently who's a chronic flincher, like I was when I started, and I feel for these guys, because singing is incredibly difficult for them. And most people are on the other side of the spectrum, or roughly in the middle. Typically singers don't flinch, at least ones that are reasonably good. It's more the case that if you're a flincher, you're in the minority, believe it or not. Now, all that being said, let's just simplify it all down and make some kind of a conclusion. We choose something to focus on that's in that neutral to positive range. The challenge is, regardless of what's going on outside or how the performance is going, can we hold that focus? Are you going to allow your mind to drift back off into the negative, drift back off into trying to help, which will again lead to the flinch? So the challenge is, choose something to focus on, and can you maintain that focus throughout the performance? This is the mental side of singing, the inner game of singing that we're talking about. Can you maintain that focal point? If you can, you won't flinch. If you can't, which at first, if you're a flincher, especially a chronic flincher, it'll be almost impossible for you to stay on that positive focal point. Your mind will be in such a habit of drifting back to the negative, drifting back to trying to help, consciously help the process, that it will be almost impossible. But you have to put in the time and the work to try and maintain that focal point, the correct focal point. If you can't, you're done. Simple as that. So outside of all the mechanics that you're working on, you've got to be working on this, because you can work on mechanics for years, but if you can't maintain the right focus point in the mind, you can have perfect mechanics, believe it or not, and you'll still flinch constantly, because you're not trusting in the voice. You're not allowing it to. You're not allowing the subconscious to do all that work that you've repeated and put into the subconscious over a long period of time. Trust your voice. Really, that's all it comes down to: is, are you scared? Are you frightened? Or are you trusting your voice and allowing it to do what it can do? The focus point you choose is going to lead you towards one of those outcomes, and you've got to gradually, over a period of time, learn to maintain that focus point and become rock solid with your mental game. Then, when your mechanics are good, there's a chance that you can just allow them to do the work, and you won't need to worry about it anymore. And then you'll be a great singer. And that's it. Cool. See you in a bit, guys. Enjoy. Thank you. Bye.